Alrighty, guys, Jordan from Precondo here. A question I've been getting a lot more frequently lately is, Jordan, these launch prices, they seem pretty high. Is there any way I can get a pre-construction unit for cheaper than these new launch prices? And the answer, as is most things with real estate, is pretty nuanced, right? So it depends really on the type of product you're looking for and where you're looking. But more often than not, the answer is yes, you can save a considerable amount of money by looking at other options. Truth is, most buildings in Toronto don't actually sell out 100% of their inventory on launch. A lot of developers these days will hold back 10 to 30% of their inventory to release at a later date. And while yes, that later release will come at a slightly higher price than the initial offering on day one, pre-public sales, it'll almost always be cheaper than the new hot project that's launching at day one sales in the neighborhood. So I see inventory every day, and I help clients buy this type of inventory every day where they're saving 50 to 100K plus over what a new launch is actually selling at. And really it comes down to if you're willing to make a couple of sacrifices, namely just time to completion, right? So, in the case of holdback inventory or unsold inventory, you're talking about a project that launched a year or 2 or 3 years ago. And so in those instances, instead of closing in 4, 5, 6 years, it might be closing in 2, 3, or 4 years. And so you have a little bit less time between, purchasing the unit and when it's actually going to close. So if you're like an assignment flipping investor, which I don't think is a viable investment strategy anymore, because these days you're paying, $1,600, $1,700 a foot for a pre-construction condo, and neighboring resale buildings are going for $1,300 a foot. And you tack on top of that the new assignment tax implications as of May 7th, and assignment flipping just doesn't make any sense anymore. So in my view, that version of investing is dead and has been for a number of years. So take Etobicoke here as an example. This is a chart I put together of the price per square foot of a one bedroom at the day one pre-public sales for a number of launches that happened between 2017 and 2021 in Etobicoke. The blue line you can see here are the day one prices, and they only trend in one direction, right? Land costs go up, construction costs go up, and of course, the general resale market goes up for the most part as well. So you can see here launch prices only go one way. We'll take Valhalla for an example. You had it launch at $675 a foot. They increased prices to $745 a foot after the pre-public offering. Then they increased again to $810 a square foot. Now, all the way here, right, 2 years post-launch, they still had some really good one-bedroom plans. Some of them had really good views as well. You could pick them up for just over $800 a foot. Meanwhile, these new launches in Etobicoke that are comparable in a number of ways were coming out north of $900 a foot. So you're talking about saving $100 a square foot, so $50,000 on a one-bedroom type of thing here. That's a huge savings, right? So you fast forward 10, 20 years, that's an extra $50,000 profit. If it's an investment, if it's something you're living in, obviously just in general, it's better to pay less, right? It doesn't make sense to pay more when there are other options out there if those projects do work for you. So the general rule of thumb here is day one launch prices are the absolute best price you'll ever get at a specific pre-construction building, meaning the prices in that building will never go down for later releases. However, that doesn't make it the best pre-construction deal in the neighborhood. In fact, there are almost always better deals as far as a per square foot value goes. So a couple of areas of interest here that I've highlighted. You've got sort of the core, the downtown core of Toronto here. New launches coming out at $1,650, $1,700 a foot, even higher than that for small units. You have the DuPont Junction area. You're seeing $1,400 a foot on new launches here. And then you have the Humber Bay area seeing $1,350 a foot as sort of a blended average with 2 bedrooms, closer to $1,420 a foot on smaller units. And in terms of, held back inventory or unsold inventory, you can pick up previous launches at these prices. So in the core, I've got a project at $1,410 a foot. In DuPont Junction, I've got a project at $1,205 a foot. And at Humber Bay at $1,157 a square foot. We're not talking this isn't pennies on the dollar. We're not talking about saving a small amount of change here. Saving $150 a square foot on a 650 square foot unit is over $90,000 in price difference, right? That is a significant change. So if you fast forward 10, 20 years, because my personal opinion is when you're buying pre-construction condos in Toronto, you should be looking at it as a long-term hold. And when you analyze it in that light of that long-term hold strategy, both investors, whether you buy the new launch at $1,350 or $1,157 a foot, both are likely to do incredibly well. But the person who saves $90,000, $100,000 on their at time of acquisition is going to have $90,000 or $100,000 in additional profit at the time of selling the asset, right? And so that's something to consider. This project starting north of $1 million, this one starting in the 800s, this one starting in the high 700s. Now let's shift focus a little bit and talk about the general market. I'll probably do a separate video for a longer, sort of more in-depth market update video, but just to cover things quickly, we're seeing prices cool in every asset class of the Greater Toronto area, with the exception being condos. So condos are holding up the best right now. They actually saw prices go up. All other asset classes here, you can see, it's probably small on the screen for you, but you can see here, they're starting to cool off. Now this is GTA specifically. Now this is a great chart. This shows, so the red bars here are basically the price gains, so the appreciation based on region of housing prices from February of 2020 to February of 2022. So sort of, start of COVID to now. And then the orange is the price cooling, right? Or the correction that we saw from February of this year through April of this year. You'll notice that, the fringe GTA areas are getting hit pretty hard and pretty quickly. Durham's down 15%, Simcoe's down 15%, Dufferin down 23%, Halton 12, Peel's down 10%, Greater Toronto area as an average is down 8.9%. But interestingly enough, the city of Toronto, the 416 proper, if you draw the boundary around proper Toronto, is actually up from February through April. I don't know why everyone's so shocked about this, right? I think it's pretty ridiculous to see, your home go up in value in Durham 86% in a 2-year period and assume that you're not going to see some correction somewhere along the way. 30-40% appreciation year over year is just not sustainable in any means. And so, of course, those areas are going to be really sensitive to rate hike. Interestingly, of course, Toronto is holding up the best. And if you watch my previous videos, I warned about this. I said these areas outside of Toronto, I was always picking on Whitby as a specific example, saying that, they're prone to correction. They've appreciated 80-90% in a couple of years. And it's at the point where it was at the point where a detached home in Whitby was roughly the same price as a detached home in Alderwood in Toronto proper. Now, if we zoom into York here, you can see that, York in particular is getting hit pretty hard. Detached is down 16% from February to May. Townhomes down 19%, semis down 17%. And again, condos holding up the best because they appreciated the least over COVID at a plus 2%. So they're up 2%. In the last couple of months. And I do think this is a trend that will continue. I assume we'll see some pain in the condo market at some point. We'll probably see a minor correction. But it's important to remember that over the last 2 years, detached have really ran. And the gap between the average price of a detached home and a condo in the 416 specifically is north of $1 million, a level not previously seen since 2017. And we all know what happened then. So I imagine that condos will hold up best. But it is worth noting that, when investor sentiment is on the decline, condos have more investors in that asset class than detached homes. So they're more prone to fire sales. We already saw that through COVID. We're not quite seeing it now, but it is kind of worth noting here. Thank you to Scott Ingram for this nice chart. So this is the 416 benchmark price for a condo unit. You can see through COVID, the light gray line here, that it declined. And then in 2021, it rose. And then in 2022, rapid price gains over 2021. So again, condos holding up the best so far. But it is worth noting, inventory is building in both sectors, right? So freehold and condo inventory is growing. This is the months of inventory chart from Scott. So you can kind of see here, we are at roughly 2 months of inventory. At 3 months of inventory, we break into, balanced market territory. And then north of 5 months of inventory, we reach a buyer's market, which frankly, I don't see in the cards, but time will tell. So some people might be saying, hey, look, if the condo resale market does correct, maybe I can get a better deal on the pre-construction market. The answer to that is, of course, no. If you've been watching my videos, pre-construction isn't priced as a function of where the resale market's at. It's priced at a function of cost, right? And costs for pre-construction condos are going up tremendously. So for example, they're proposing a 49% increase in development charges. And of course, we are getting inclusionary zoning and a new foundation policy that essentially requires developers to use a bathtub foundation on all of their high-rise sites. The foundation policy will add $15 to $35 per buildable foot, and inclusionary zoning, meaning including affordable housing as a part of your development, will add $25 to $50 per buildable foot. You can see they break down inclusionary zoning percentages, so 5 to 10% of your building, depending on where your building is located. And of course, you can see here just a nice graphic from Jeremiah and Collier's, just showing that at the end of the day, inclusionary zoning just results in higher saleable condo prices. because obviously the developers just pass along that cost to you, the buyer. So rough numbers here. I did a little napkin math. So cost inflation on an 800 square foot pre-construction unit when all of these policies are in place, this is going to see a $70,000 to $102,000 increase in the cost of building it potentially, which of course is just a cost passed along to the consumer. And of course, construction costs are up 28% for high rise in the last 2 years. And 35% for low rise. So that's something to consider as well. Some of those material costs are coming back down now, but it's still very elevated. Labor unions, obviously, you're seeing strikes, you're seeing renegotiation on rates. So that'll probably get worse as well. Now, what's really interesting, tying back to the earlier chart that shows that the outskirts GTA areas are cooling and the core is doing okay so far. This is a chart from Bullpen Consulting and Ben Myers showing the average launch price per square foot for condos in and around the GTA, but excluding the downtown core, right? Excluding Toronto proper. And you can see that, on average, they're up 65% over 2 years. So the pre-construction condo launch prices are up 65%, and the resale market in these areas are up 65% as well. Developers, they'll tell you they prefer building out in these areas because the profit margins are higher. But in the same time period, the average launch price of a pre-construction condo in Toronto is only up 15-20%. So to me, that's where the value lies. So if you want more information on the projects that I mentioned earlier, book a call with me, precondo.ca/call. 10-15 minute phone call. We can go through options and see if there's one that works for you. And that's it for this video, guys. I will see you guys hopefully tomorrow with a more extensive market update.